So the year was 1996. Anybody remember that year? That year, Dolly the sheep was the first mammal ever to be cloned. The Spice Girls had their first hit. Anybody remember that one? If you want to be my lover. And I was a 13-year-old nerd. And I was glued to my TV screen in one day in 1996 because that year a NASA scientist announced that in his examination of the Martian meteorite ALH 84001, his team had detected what they believed to be the fossilized remains of Martian nanobacteria. President Bill Clinton actually gave a speech to commemorate the discovery. I literally cried real, wet, cheek-running tears of joy that day in front of my television. Now, today, most scientists believe that meteorite doesn't actually contain extraterrestrial life remains. But I will never forget how much awe and wonder I felt that day about the prospect of this discovery. You may not know this, but up until I was about 20 years old, I was convinced that instead of being a pastor or doing anything in religion, that I would spend my life in the field of astrobiology, which is actually the study of the possibilities of life elsewhere in the universe. Now, it's not necessarily, I don't think, unrelated to my current work. I've actually heard more than one person come out of United Methodist ordination interviews claiming to have been asked the question, do you believe in extraterrestrial life in the universe? I don't know what the questioner was expecting to hear from that question, but because I don't think there's an official Christian doctrine on extraterrestrial life. If anybody knows of one, I would love to hear it. But I really kind of love that question. I actually love all of the big questions of science. One of the things that has always drawn me to science is that it focuses on these whole worlds that humans did not create. These whole worlds that we don't control and that we will never truly understand. Galaxies far, far away, world-ending events going on all the time around us that we will never even detect. Or strong forces and weak forces between particles that are so small that we have to totally contort all of our ideas of reality to even imagine them. I am a big nerd about all that stuff. And I know I'm not alone. I know there's some of you in here are smiling at me right now. Okay, thank you. Every Friday, a group of us sit down in the basement with Nelson. If anybody's new here, Nelson is our amazing friend who is at risk of deportation and taking sanctuary in this church. And we sit down with him every Friday, and we do this weekly check-in about how things are going. And, we talk about Nelson and his life, but we also talk about lots and lots of random stuff in our own lives. And it's been nice to get to know some of the people on that support team. One of the members of that group is a student named Emily. And I'm new to the group, so I don't know a lot about Emily yet, but I do know that Emily reads really interesting books. And in case you're wondering what Emily's reading, which you should be, she is currently reading a novel about trees. Like a book of fiction whose main characters are trees. Some of you bookworms may have heard of this new novel by Richard Powers called The Overstory. Anybody heard of this? Oh, I'm the first one to tell you about it. It's great. So among our random tangents in those Friday check-ins, some of our conversations recently have turned to the amazing life of plants that exist all around us, but that we don't really think about at all. I've actually started reading this novel as well, and there is this beautiful passage on the 3rd page of the book. I'm going to read a little bit of it for you. It's actually a forest of trees, and they are talking to a woman who's there in their midst. And they say, "All the ways you imagine us, bewitched mangroves up on stilts, a nutmeg's inverted spade, gnarled Baja elephant trunks, the straight-up missile of a sal, are always amputations. Your kind never sees us whole. You miss the half of it, and more. There's always as much below ground as above. That's the trouble with people, their root problem. Life runs alongside them unseen. Right here, right next, creating the soil, cycling water, trading in nutrients, making weather, building atmosphere, feeding and curing and sheltering more kinds of creatures than people know how to count. A chorus of living wood sings to the woman, "If your mind were only a slightly greener thing, we'd drown you in meaning." Isn't that beautiful? It reminds you that there are these wondrous miracles going on all around us in every moment that we aren't even aware of. Emily was telling us this past Friday that some folks are starting to think of the forest ecosystem not just as a big collection of many individual organisms competing in this Darwinian way for resources, but instead some are starting to wonder if we should start to think about the forest more as one giant organism with little pieces that are all contributing to and working toward the health of the whole life form. I love that idea. That it's not about individual organisms competing for survival, but it's all about the pieces working together in one larger life. I love that frame shift, that maybe we're all in it together. You know, we're all on the same team, connected and in relationship, one big life, struggling not for my own glory, my own success, my own legacy, but we're all just participating in the beauty and the struggle of the whole organism of life itself. It's kind of biblical, actually. There are a few plant-based metaphors for our life with God in the Bible. Jesus says, "I am the vine, and you are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit, because apart from me, you can do nothing." According to Jesus, we're not just random fruity branches out there. We are part of a larger vine organism, a part of a larger life form. And we only bear fruit by working all together in that whole divine life. In the very first psalm that we read together today, the wicked are compared to chaff that are driven away by the wind. But the righteous are like trees planted by streams of water, which yield their fruit in its season, and their leaves do not wither. The righteous, which, if you were wondering, are the kinds of people that we're supposed to strive to be like. The righteous, unlike the wicked, the righteous are grounded in the earth, held in place by a larger ecosystem, held by something greater than themselves that gives them life. They're participating in a larger life. You know, I will just share this very personal element of my spirituality. There have been times in my life when I have wondered, and this is because, you know, I am a young person in this secular society. Most of my friends don't go to church. there have been times in my life when I have wondered, do I really believe in this stuff? Or am I just an atheist who loves the Bible and loves hanging out with you all? Do I really believe there is something bigger out there, a transcendent life that we call God? And when I press myself on that question, I have to say yes. And it's not because I see supernatural visions or witness inexplicable miracles. It's because there are these moments in my life when I just know that I am tapping into something that is beyond me. When I know I'm participating in a life that is bigger than me, bigger even than humanity or even than organic life on earth. I can feel it sometimes. When I'm comforting my child, I know that I am participating in a bigger life. When I'm having a conversation with somebody over coffee and one of us realizes that we really needed to hear just exactly what that other person said, I feel like I am participating in a bigger life. When I am sitting utterly still with no agenda, just observing the miracle of light reflecting off of leaves, dancing in the wind, I know I am participating in a bigger life. And my everyday spirituality, and I think I preached the same sermon a few weeks ago, really. My everyday spirituality is really about trying to follow those moments of connection to that bigger life, to seek them out, to participate more and more, as much as I can in that life that is beyond all life, that includes all life. And that's so important, especially on those days when I experience those personal failures, when I feel like I haven't been able to do the things I wanted to do, when I feel like I'm not good enough or haven't achieved the thing. It gives me this peace to remember that it's not about me building my mountain and climbing it. It's not about me getting into the promised land. I'm part of a larger organism, a larger community and life, and the mountains are ours to build together and ours to climb together so that part of our whole will cross the Jordan River into the land flowing with milk and honey. And it will be my privilege to say, I participated in that life. I'll just end by saying a word about the church and participating in the bigger life. Because sometimes as a church, we think that we're the only tree in the forest, like we're some isolated succulent that doesn't need any food or water from anyone else, and we're planted in some desert, and we bring the beauty, the life, the glory, the salvation to the world. But I have found more and more that God lives in the church. God abides in the church. And God also lives and abides and breathes and saves outside of the church. In whole ecosystems, whole worlds that we as the church may not even know exist. When I was pastoring in New York City, I found one of those ecosystems through an organization called PFLAG. Is anybody familiar with PFLAG? It stands for Parents, Family, and Friends of Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, Transgender, and Queer LGBTQ people. And PFLAG is at its essence a network of support groups for parents who need help making sense of and advocating for their children who have come out as LGBTQ. That alone is truly awesome and sacred. But in New York City, I had the privilege of being invited into the work of a group within flag called the API, or Asian Pacific Islander Project, or API Rainbow Parents is what they called themselves. And it was basically this small group of API mothers of LGBTQ people. And these mothers were some of the most inspiring people I have ever met. They were always seeking out, new API parents to join their group, but it was really difficult because so few Asian American young people have come out to their families. So instead, these women have become not only fiercely supportive mothers to their own children, but they have really become the moms of the API LGBTQ community in New York City. They are the moms of that group. These moms host API holiday gatherings. They march alongside LGBTQ young people at the Lunar New Year parades that not long ago banned their participation. They advocate for family acceptance from New York to LA to Japan. They host coming out workshops for young people who are considering coming out to their immigrant and international families. And they just love on and become family to those people in the community who have been rejected by their biological families. And I was so honored to be invited to offer a simple Christian presence in some of those gatherings that they hosted. And I have to tell you, I saw more salvation in some of those gatherings hosted by those flag moms than I have seen in many churches. Have you ever even heard of this group? Did you know that any truly sacred work like this was going on? That young, queer API kids in New York are being saved from isolation and depression and suicide by this beautiful family-based ecosystem? You had no idea, right? In Harlem and Chinatown and Astoria, Queens, life runs along us unseen, right here, right next, creating the soil, cycling water, trading in nutrients, making weather, building atmosphere, feeding and curing and sheltering more kinds of creatures than people know how to count. Here in New Haven, First and Summerfield has, in this last year, begun to see and participate in an ecosystem of compassion and justice that I certainly wasn't aware of before. Through our relationship with the Sanctuary Movement and with ULA, Unidad Latina en Acción, which is a grassroots immigrant and labor rights organization here in New Haven. On Friday, Nelson's 16-year-old daughter, Kelly, she published, if you haven't read it, you got to check it out. She published this very moving opinion piece in the New York Times about what it's like to be in a family whose father is in physical sanctuary, what it's actually like to be one of the families at risk of being separated in this new era of racist, zero-tolerance government policy. And Kelly's beautiful piece struck a chord with people around the country. A good number of them called or emailed our church this weekend. Kelly's words and the courageous witness of her family and the work of ULA are playing a part in changing our nation for the better. They are having a sacred and salvific impact on the lives of individual families and on our society as a whole. Every time they advocate for a vulnerable person or show the powerful the real human cost of their decisions and votes, they are participating in the life of God. And it is our privilege to participate with them in that ecosystem of love, justice, and courage that so many people in this community don't even know about. Beloveds, there is a whole world of God's goodness and joy and compassion just pulsing all around us. An unseen, living network of glory and salvation, feeding and curing and sheltering right here, right next. May we, as individuals and as a church, seek out that sacred entanglement, plant ourselves in its soil, affix our existence to its vines and to its roots, and participate as well as we can in that divine life. Thanks be to God. Amen.